Permaculture really starts with an ethic, earth care. That's care of the whole systems of earth and the species. So we actually devise model systems. Much of the design is drawn from nature. The end result that we aim for is to produce a system that's ecologically sound and economically profitable. It can get as sophisticated or as simple as you like. Every desert has a unique characteristic, and here in the Sonoran Desert, it's a large tree cacti. And here it's a saguaro cacti. A little further south, it's a cardon, a much larger cactus than the saguaro. And all of these cacti originally grew in forests, forests that were usually up about as high as the first limbs of the cacti. And the saguaro can't continue to exist without a forest around its feet. It's because the young cactus can't exist in open desert such as we see around us. It has to have shade. So the saguaro are expected to last perhaps another 40 years, and then they'll be gone too. So the solitary saguaro, standing on its own in the sand, has become almost a symbol of desert. Instead, it should be a symbol of our stupidity in not taking care of the total environment. Like vast areas of America, this is part of the Great Dust Bowl of the 1930s, when most of the soil blew away. Between 1930 and 1935, Franklin Roosevelt had 3 million Americans out with supervisors and engineers repairing America. And it's the first time in American history and the last time. It's also one of the very rare times in the history of the world that anybody in charge of a country has put the people of the country to work to repair the damage. They built hundreds of miles of earth banks which held up the runoff water long enough to settle out the silt behind them and for some water to soak into the ground. And this is called swaling. And these swales were made by horses and scoops and men. And today we have bulldozers, but we don't do this repair work on country. It's very rich in the swales, both the soils and the trees. And we'll go down and have a closer look at that. Yeah, in the swale there's a green cover of herbaceous material. It covers up all the weeds and it makes a sort of a sandwich of weeds and silt that builds up slowly. This is about 60 years old. These were built by engineers for purely physical reasons to stop the gully erosion extending and occurring. But nature's taken it over, and we could have planted it with pomegranates, fig. You know, look in the soils of these swales. They're moist. They're pretty rich with organic material and they've got a good silt in them. And you just, today, could plant them with seeds that will wait for rain. So that's the sort of thing we could do right through these old swale systems. And there are thousands of miles of them in the United States. I first found these old swales in 1986, 87, and I'd been putting in hundreds of miles of swales, but I couldn't have seen the swales that I've been putting in 60 years' time. And it's just tremendous confidence that you get from finding these old structures that have never been looked at, they've never been repaired, and they've never been noticed by the population. And find they've been quietly working for 60 years without any maintenance. I think it's marvellous, fantastic, actually. They didn't make any mistakes. They did almost everything right. They had a lot of good hydrologists, good engineers, and good common sense, practical people working for them. It's a shame that modern nations can't turn all their people out to repair their country today, God. They'd be really fascinated with that, because the idea of integrating the tribal and wildlife parks is very dear to all of us, as you know. We'll be doing that in Kenya in September, by the way. Okay. In the West, we've been accustomed to reducing areas to desert and then moving our operations elsewhere. But in Africa and in the Kalahari, there are several language groups for whom this desert is their home. So quite obviously, this is an area of great need. It's also a very tough proposition for us to tackle. I've been invited here by some of my student teachers, who are Tswana people, to come into the desert and see some of their tribal students at work. And also bringing some new foods in, because there are more and more people and we need to feed more people. We will have success because we keep trying. A few of us will have success. And then we must teach other people. The people here were hunter-gatherers. And at one time the desert was thick with game. Cattle have destroyed 60% of the food plants they used to gather. There are very few left indeed. As for the game, the EEC demanded that fences be put across the Kalahari for production of beef. This has successfully killed off most of the migratory animals. So with the death of those animals and the death of their plants, people have to take up gardening, something they're very unused to. In order to address the problems of the remote area dwellers, we've been invited here by the tribal people and the Hansi District Council to see students and teachers at a place called Hrotalakta, where gardening is just beginning.
Sweet potato cake.
In every compound are the animals that were brought in for shelter from lions or from predators the night before. Previously, all the compound and the fencing material was built out of trees, which are now gone. So the first request of any group in the Kalahari will be for barbed wire and for gates, because there's many miles before we come to good tree country. So we're showing how to adapt local material to new conditions. Here we're demonstrating you don't have to cut down a lot of trees to make the walls of a pen. It's a natural goat pen in the middle of a standing clump, and where there is no trees in the circle, the roots are cut below the ground. So you can use living trees to fill the gaps. And it's already quite fertile on the side. By the time the goats have been in here for a while, it'll be more fertile. And then we can use it for a garden. And so what we're teaching here is growing your goat pens, not cutting down the environment and making a lot of yards. A well-fenced family compound takes just over 1,000 large acacia trees from the desert, and that means that much of the trees around the settlements are removed simply for fencing. In about 20 years, the termites eat them off, and you have to go look for more trees, but there may be no more trees. So the introduction of just one species here, Euphorbia tyricale, which are close set as cuttings, stop all cattle and goats but are not eaten by them. This is a great benefit because there's no longer any need to cut the trees. Six months ago, we gave a course to the women of East Hanahai, 100 kilometres away, and I was very interested to see how their garden was getting on. Although East Hanahai is extremely dry, 300 people live here. Therefore, any strategy, no matter how small, that we can use to catch water is of great use. Well, this is a runoff pan made of concrete, and the rain comes down and down this pipe and into the underground system where it won't evaporate. And we use exactly the same system to set up wells in the desert for people or for game animals, quail or guinea fowl. We built a pan system here some months ago, costing only $200, and it enables us to get a garden going and seedlings watered. Here we are in the women's garden, and it's just beautiful. The beds are raised so the salt will go down through the soil. The seedlings are in here, and there's a lot of seedling onion. And under here, which look like little huts, there's actually young seedlings for the winter greens. So they're fully shaded in here. Then they're growing very well. In the center of this little mandala bed is an acacia tree. It will provide nitrogen for the beds and shade. And all the natural vegetation has been left in this garden. It doesn't look bare and barren, and it provides the material for the shade houses, and it's just great, actually, considering only November that they got their first course. They've used exactly the same techniques of little shade huts to get their fruit trees going, and this will improve the vitamins in their diet. Yeah, I like this garden very much.
Even this side is...
No, I think it's very good. It's very hard conditions. Once a group of women are well organised in a village, they're the best source for us to work with. Their information is the best, and they are the most motivated. And they prepare progress reports and bring them in for discussion in meetings. The Women's Report specifically requests help in dealing with the new types of vegetables. In response to requests like this, Dorothy Underbar, one of my first students and now a teacher, has brought some of her friends, and they've come up to show these women at Rotolacta precisely what you do with the vegetables grown in the Kalahari Desert and how to make the best nutritional use of them.
From our inquiries, we found out that people in this district were not used to using melons the way we are going to use it today. The good thing about it is that no part of the melon is thrown away. Right from the stalk, while it has green leaves, we use the green leaves for vegetables. And then we use the young melon for eating. And then when the melon is mature, it's used as I've described. So this is completely new to them, making porridge from the melon pulp.
Melon pulp with sorghum makes a marvellous porridge. No other water's needed. My African students are amazingly efficient in becoming teachers because in Botswana there is a real need for food and nutrition. We'd had 7 years of drought and everybody was beginning to starve. And with real need, human beings organise themselves and respond very quickly.
We were very nervous, and the first day was real hell. We thought the sun would never set. One thing we are happy about is that most